Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Today's episode is with Isaac Mashman, and he says he's addicted to coffee and standards. And what we talk about is personal branding. And we dial this in for you if you're a sales professional, if you're a salesperson, if you own a company. Yes, because you know your brand and your marketing is important as a company, but as an individual, this is what we're talking about. What you can do, what you should be doing, what you should be thinking about for your personal brand on social media. And it's not, taking a picture of what you had for dinner and posting it on Facebook, right? That unless that's your thing where you're doing reviews of food, right? So Isaac gets into some of the reasons of what you're trying to accomplish. Um, he's really approachable. He's really easy to talk to. He's very accessible. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, and strap in for another educational episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So Isaac, welcome to Sales and Cigars. I appreciate you taking some time to join us for a conversation.
Walter, thank you for the invitation. A little jealous of you. Have a call scheduled later tonight. I'll be smoking a cigar, but I'm in the office. I don't think the landlord would be too happy if I lit up a cigar in here.
Yeah, my landlord provides me with some grace, seeing it's me. I built my own little cigar lounge that's turned into my podcast office, my company office. So I get a little bit more flexibility than most people do. Um, so, um, so we're going to talk about branding and marketing, but I kind of want to ask a couple of questions before we get going there. Is there a book that you reread or that you gift often to people in the business world?
Yeah, and it would actually be a book that would be perceived as controversial to people who just read it by face value or hear the term. And it's actually The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. It's one of these books that, we use this term Machiavellian as this dark type, dark energy kind of, oh, you're trying to be deceitful. And in the book, he's actually writing it from a third-party standpoint. It was a gift to one of the, I suppose, princes, right, of Italy. And Italy has a fascinating culture, just in terms of the Roman Catholic Church and, it maintaining power, and eventually there being a revolution and the church losing that power. And there's a reason why it's consolidated to Vatican City today, because that empire used to stretch for hundreds and hundreds of miles. But in the book, he wrote it as a gift to, in my opinion, he wrote it to get into another position of power, because he previously was a consigliere. He was somebody who offered advice, and he, by the end of his life, lost a lot of that influence he had because the family that he was working with, I believe, fell out of power. One of the people died, and he sent it as a gift, and it wasn't confirmed if the person he gifted it to, I don't remember the actual name. I don't even want to think about that, but it's not even confirmed if they read it, right? Because it was published, I believe, after his death. But in the book, he talks a lot about how to maintain good people around you more than anything. And he says that, one of the biggest downfalls of the prince is having bad advisors that have pretty much attached their success in a selfish manner and will look for any way to gain that upper hand on the person in power. And he says in one of the chapters that the smart ruler, right, the smart prince, needs to find people who attach their success to the prince's success. And I've adopted that too, because anytime that I bring on a consultant or somebody I want to work with, I want to make sure that they're somebody who wants to grow with me, right? We're in this together, in this business relationship. And I believe that in a business sense, it's really an underrated book, and you cannot just think about it from this dark energy trying to manipulate people, but rather understanding human intentions and understanding what you can do to achieve that sort of power in your own business and your own life. So I believe it's a necessary read, whether or not you're interested in history or psychology, but just from the face value and diving deep into it and studying it, not just, if you just read it, you're not going to understand it. But if you dive deep into it like a textbook and go chapter by chapter, there's a lot to, unpack there. And it's something I need to pick up. I have an illustrated copy. I found it at Goodwill, actually. I was really blessed to find that. I need to reread it. It's been a couple months since I last picked it up.
That's a first, dude. So I appreciate that. And everything I've ever read about that that book has always been, as you say, this from a negative perspective. But when we are looking for that advisor, that people that we're working with, employees, right, as well, we need to make sure that our vision and their vision is aligned, and that we're working towards the same objectives and same
Yep.
goals. And I think one thing, I'll have to go and look at this. It's probably a book that you need to dive into over a period of time, based on what you're saying. But to me, it's like if we have employees, or if we have a particular partner that we're working with, it's important, I think, to tell them how they can influence our vision, how they can achieve the vision of the company, the greater good. If we don't tell them how they do that in their position, at their level of function, at their level of authority, I think we miss the boat. And I think that's a common thing I see with CEOs and business owners. They great at explaining the vision, but they don't always help the individual realize, this is why, and this is what you can do every day, every week to make
Definitely.
that happen. And I'm kind of curious if that was something that came out of the book like that, or was it, did they go that deep? Because I have to be honest, I haven't read that book. I just heard things about it.
Yeah, it's definitely worth reading, Walter. I mean, for any stage in business. I mean, it's just interesting too, because it's such a cultural piece to where that phrase in psychology is, well recognized. You have phrases like narcissism and, psychopath, sociopath, and then you have Machiavellian, right? The personality types. But in the book, if I'm not mistaken, he does talk about kind of setting that vision, right? And kind of having a common enemy. If you have a common enemy that you can attack and kind of get the people on board for, because he writes it from a 30,000 foot overview, to use that analogy of being in an airplane, right? Of like, you have all this territory. Where are you sending troops? Where are you sending resources? And there are strategies like in the book that he actually explicitly says that he doesn't endorse a lot of the strategies, which is interesting. And he says that, you should never be outright evil and do these things without some end goal in mind. And he uses the example of a prince who, I believe he was a duke actually, and he, basically killed a lot of the people in power, or did something heinous. And what he did is, rather than taking the fall himself, he had a fall guy. And he had a general that he put in the town square and basically let the public kill. And so the prince looks great, and you have this fall guy. And so, Niccolo, he says, don't do these strategies just to be, evil mannered, but I believe in a business sense, setting a vision that is achievable. And for example, in my own company with Mashman Consulting Group, I've publicly set the goal of being the number one public relations, or not public relations, I'm still in that PR standpoint, but the number one personal brand consultancy that is able to work and assist clients from all walks of life, all professions, in an ethical manner, in a moral manner, because the public relations space and the personal branding space, there's so much sleazeballs, right? And I believe that in sales, you've probably seen these guys that are just like selling products or services that they themselves don't believe in, or things that are, snake oil. And I've set that public goal of being the number one personal brand consultancy and having a team of 500 consultants by 2035. But why is that, right? I could set the vision, but why? What's the deeper meaning? And it's really to set the tone in a positive manner and provide the proper advice and provide the proper, certifications, the proper strategies to people, so they don't get scammed, and so they don't fall victim to the fake Forbes feature, to the fake followers, to the fake crap that everybody else sells online. The Lamborghini hustle bro culture, which we see a lot, that's evident on social media today.
It's when you were describing the Lamborghini, that fake group, what pops into my mind are those commercials, infomercials, late night, where they're doing the hard sell, all that we know inherently is crap. We know there's a catch. We know there's some moral proclivity there that just it isn't clean. But somehow people are still drawn to that shortcut. And they're drawn to the idea of getting someplace faster, and it's not generational. A lot of people out here are like, wow, kids today, right? Well, kids today, they've been saying that for 120 years, right? Everybody's been talking about it. It to me, it's just a human thing that people aren't willing to do the work,
Right.
and recognize that it takes some time and you're going to make mistakes along the way, but you gotta do the work. And I don't
Mhm.
care if it's sales or marketing or just generally running a business. You got to go do the work and make the mistakes.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of the diet pill versus the actually working out and eating right. Everybody wants a six pack overnight, and so they'll do the Weight Watchers, do the programs, purchase the pill, or you could, I suppose, compare it to the the TV evangelist that sells holy water and thinks that you can be cured automatically, and it's like it's so unethical. And there is this innate gut feeling of this isn't really legitimate, but the hope is what leads the person to make the purchase. And sales is 80% emotions. I mean, that's common, right? Everybody uses that example. It's like, yeah, I mean, you lean into the emotional side, the dream building side, you want this because you want it, not because you need it. And that's where I think as sales professionals especially need to have kind of that moral backbone of saying, I'm not going to sell something to somebody that they don't need. And, from a personal branding standpoint, being that fake person, that fake guru, that rented Lamborghini, rented Rolls Royce is just, it's unethical because people are still going to want to support you even if you're not at that point, but you're working to get to that point, and you let these people live vicariously through your vision of what you're building towards. And I mean, it can be just as effective, and it's more effective because now you mitigate the reputational risks of somebody finding out that you're illegitimate, right? And that's kind of a big reason why I'm in this space and why I'm setting that ambitious goal of being the number one personal brand consultancy worldwide, because I believe that we can do it the right way and that we can do it with a firm ethical standing.
All right. I mean, I think if you're looking to help people, right, this is the premise of sales in my mind. If we're looking to actually help somebody and we can help them, we're obligated to do that. And if we can't help them, we understand their problem, but we can't help them, we're obligated to say, I can't help you. I'm not your guy. I do these things, but not that thing. And it's being willing to not just try to jam that square peg into the round hole. Um, and it happens for lots of reasons. But if we don't have that moral compass, then get ourselves into trouble. Our reputation gets damaged. So, and I think that's a great segue right there. So we've talked about this on the podcast. We talked about branding before. We've talked about marketing. But from your perspective, and we're thinking about individuals, what's the difference? How does a salesperson who's been around for a few years, is doing well, what should they be thinking about, and how do they know the difference between branding and marketing?
Well, let me start out by defining what personal branding is, because building a personal brand is a lot different than building a company brand. Your personal brand is you. It's who you are. And I would make the philosophical argument that you've had your personal brand from the moment you were born. Your parents determined your name, where you were born, nurtured into those characteristics and beliefs, the God that you pray to, the political ideology that you adhere to. And as an adult, you are now able to consciously direct that personal brand and direct your reputation, which is an extension of it, to achieve a particular goal. And if I could define branding versus marketing simply, branding is what you were known as, right? What you were known for. And marketing is how you can get more people to know about you. And so there's this great symbiosis that happens between the two, because how you brand yourself, think about Rolls Royce or think about Ferrari and Lamborghini compared to Ford or Chevy or GMC, right? It affects how they're marketing themselves and the marketing vehicles and the channels. Exactly. And so from a sales professional standpoint, you need to position yourself as that expert, right? Position yourself as that authority. And so if you're in the automotive detail or automotive sales industry, you need to position yourself as a top sales leader in the automotive space, and then talk about, hey, some of the strategies, talk about the client stories, talk about the sales, talk about, the end result of, hey, I was able to help Rebecca get into the car of her dreams, which was perfect for her family. And you can lean into content creation and podcasting or writing articles and, doing these things that are providing that public display of competence that people are able to latch onto and see. So whether you're adhering to the hey, I'm trying to train other professionals in my space versus I'm also showing people the ins and outs of, what it's like to be on the other end of the deal, right? And be the person who's presenting the paper and presenting the contract. You're able to position yourself as that number one person, which will help you cut through the noise because it's hyper competitive, right? There's no shortage of sales professionals. There's no shortage of content creators online. But by positioning yourself and saying, hey, I help do X, Y, and Z, I help automotive dealerships increase their sales, right? You are able to effectively be that go-to, be that referral partner for the people who are looking for referrals. And we're talking about a couple minutes ago, if you're not able to provide or work with that client, right, or maybe not being able to provide that service or product, chances are somebody who could. And so by you taking the moral path and saying, I can't help you, but I know somebody who can, you're building a phenomenal relationship with the person you send them to. Right? By being that referral partner, you're thinking of them and you're saying, hey, I know James, I know Walter, right? I know Willis, and he's going to be able to walk with you and provide that exact thing that I might not be able to, but you're still going to be able to get that end result. And maybe down the line, if you see a need, I'm still going to be here. The company's still going to be here. So you could obviously follow up with me. But for where you're at right now, why don't you go with this person? And that helps you stand out in the space as somebody who has that moral backbone and has that spine, which I believe as a culture and as a society is more important than ever to be able to say, hey, we're not the best fit, but I know somebody who is. And that right there helps you stand out.
It's creating credibility
Yes.
for yourself, right? And my belief, and I'm curious if this falls in the line, if we're authentic to who we are and we're really listening to the individual that we're talking to and trying to disqualify somebody, we're obligated to tell them that. And we're looking for that credibility is created through the questions we ask. Mm-hmm. and being a resource rather than always trying to sell something, because right. I think you said it earlier, no one likes to be sold to, but everybody likes to buy. And I think that's there's a distinction there that you could write a book about. I think Daniel Pink has written books about that, but my point is we need to be clear about what it is that we can really do to help somebody. And if they're not in our lane, have a toolbox of resources to share. That's gonna help create that credibility rather than trying to put a square peg into a round hole.
Well, and what you're talking about is also connecting on a personal level, right? Sales people go wrong because they only focus on the service or the outcome, and they don't focus on the individual and talking about their needs and talking about their desires. So last week I was in Denver for a conference where I spoke, and it was in the water feature space. So I was talking to people who create these beautiful koi ponds, waterfalls, outdoor water features. And one of the things that was made clear to me was how much of a luxury and an emotional connection these water features have to these people. Because think about it, if you've had the dream for your entire life to have a koi pond, now you're in this space to where now you can get a koi pond built. It's not just some pond. It's not just a water or a body of water that has some fish in it. It's this, no, I have a pond because my dad had a pond, and now I'm able to take my daughter and dip her toes into the water and feed the fish and create these memories. And so you're connecting with the person. And in the personal branding space, you can just say, I help do X, Y, and Z. I help coaches increase their revenue by $30,000 in 90 days. But okay, cool. So does the next guy. But if you can say, hey, avid cigar enthusiast, right? Like this is a point of rapport, right? And sales requires rapport, that trust. And in the personal branding space, I always encourage my clients to find that personal hook, and then you can go into the professional punchline. So I say, addicted to coffee and standards. I help emerging and established public figures optimize and scale their personal brands. So I have a personal hook, which is addicted to coffee, which I've already had so much. I'm not coming into this session with a cup of coffee in hand. But the thing is, I mean, the cigar thing for Sales and Cigars is perfect because now you're adhering to and you're connecting with people who have an enthusiasm for cigars. And then they're the sales professional. But they're connecting with you, Walter, first. And that right there is a huge piece of advice.
But it's, and I had this conversation with somebody the other day. They're like, well, don't you feel like you talking about cigars and having a cigar, doesn't that like, repel certain people or make certain people go away? And it like, does that happen? Yeah, it does. And that's okay, right?
Mhm.
Because those probably aren't my people. Might I be able to help them? Yeah, I might be able to help them with if they have a particular problem. But if they're not allowing me to be who I am, and because to me, it's relatively easy to get business, right? I mean, it's not easy, but it's if you're good at it and you have professionalism, getting the business isn't necessarily the problem. It's having for me, it's having some fun and working
Mhm.
with people that really, really want to transform. So in terms of my brand, I want somebody who's committed to going down the bumpy road
Mhm.
that is change. And it will get bumpy and it will be uncomfortable. And if we're not prepared to navigate that, right, that's why we have cigars, right? Because we got to take some time to contemplate what we're doing. Uh, but it's to me, it's okay to niche that in and lose some of those people because they're not your people.
But think about how solid of relationships you're building with the people who are your core group. So yeah, you might lose a couple people who might be turned off and be like, "Oh my God, he's smoking tobacco in 2024. How could he? How awful!"
Hmm?
Compared to the people who are saying, "Man, I like this dude. I don't even smoke cigars right now. I do, but think about somebody who's coming to your profile and be like, I don't smoke cigars, but I see the appeal of that like gentleman kind of perspective of sitting down, enjoying something, and having something that they are prideful about because that's what cigars are. Cigars are a point of relaxation, absolutely, but cigars also represent an ideology of being that I would use the term masculine, even though, women smoke cigars as well, but it's
Hmm?
traditionally more of a masculine thing. You sit around, you talk business with friends, you talk about what's going on in life. You're celebrating an occasion. So people who even aren't in the space are able to respect that and appreciate it. Maybe not to the same degree as somebody who does smoke cigars, but that gives a deeper layer of connection and a deeper layer of rapport that can be built. So these people are going to think of you and be like, man, I like Walter because of his approach, and I like the whole cigar thing. And it's like you can have an interest in something, or not have an interest in something, but still appreciate it.
But even if it's somebody who is a pipe person or they're an aficionado around beer. Okay, they have. I mean, there's a way in. There's a way to understand them. You can connect, right? Most people have knowledge about like beer or whiskey or some other thing, right? And if not, it's a curiosity where you get a chance to learn something about.
Exactly.
So it's literally a way in for somebody to start to build that rapport. And it to me, it's like it's okay if it's not for everybody, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because we can't be everything to everybody. And when we do that in sales, it gets us. I think that's what gets them into trouble, is that they're trying to sell something to somebody when it's really not a good fit. And you gain so much by saying this doesn't sound like I can really help you,
Hmm.
right? And the good news is I think I know somebody who I could refer you to that could help you with that. I mean, I've told the story before. I was helping. I was working with somebody like prospecting, and we were talking through an issue, and they had a huge problem that I could help them with, but it wasn't their biggest problem. They had a bigger problem that they had to solve, or nothing else mattered.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, so put what we're talking about on the back burner. You got to go fix that, right? I mean, or you're done. So
Definitely.
go talk to Bob. I will connect you. You make a decision as to whether Bob can really help you with that, but he'll at least give you some insight that maybe you don't have. And it turns out they're working together. They're solving the problem. There's progress, right? The tide has changed. Um, and will we do work together? Maybe. But it's like I get a certain sense of satisfaction as a salesperson that I helped the guy solve the problem.
Yeah, you're still a part of his journey, undeniably. And if you think about the sales cycle and the sales process, you need a hook, right? You need somewhere to come in and have that initial conversation. And I view the cigars thing for Sales and Cigars as a similar thing of you have the cigars, which hooks people in, and then the value and the conversations and the expertise that you're able to provide and the guests that you bring on are able to keep people there. And so you have an initial hook in the sales process that says, hey, there's a need that I can solve, but then the actual value in terms of product or service that you're selling is going to keep them on that journey with you and keep them coming back for more. In my own work in personal branding, I mean, I could work with podcasters, authors, anybody, but there's an initial need. And then as that relationship builds and as their journey progresses and they're expanding their personal brand, now 3 months might go by and there might be a new need that arises. And so that relationship and that value that I was able to initially provide them will have them come back and say, Isaac, I need another consultation. Let's work together. And that's the thing. I mean, sales is relationships. And, the biggest issue I think most people have is they're not having enough conversations and they're not learning and gathering enough information. This is something I've seen in my own business of like, hey, why is revenue down? Because I'm not talking to as many people, right? I'm not doing as much. And if you just have more conversations, chances are your revenue is going to naturally increase in parallel.
If you have the right mindset and you're providing value, it is just ability to connect with people at a certain scale. And that might be 10 people a month. It might be 100 people a month. It just depends upon the nature of your vision, your business. But I mean, you do have to be out there telling a story. The story has to be compelling. And that's really what we've been talking about is that personal brand is finding the thing that allows you to be yourself, right? That authenticity that makes it easier because people can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And being able to, I'm sure there's more to it, but if you're faking it, that's going to come out at some point.
Yeah. And what will happen is you'll go from the person who's sending referrals and eventually be the person who gets referred. Right. And so if you're solving a specific problem, or let's say you're selling, HVAC services, right? Something so niche, but something so needed. You can send, business to other HVAC professionals if you're not able to service a particular client. And it takes a certain degree of selflessness to do that. But by you positioning yourself as that, number one HVAC professional in your local industry or the top sales guy, eventually customers and clients and friends and people in your network are going to say, hey, oh, your AC broke. I got a guy. And then they can refer you. I mentioned Mike Ficara, who just launched a cigar brand out of Miami, Guido Cigars, who I'm going to refer you to and have a conversation with. I look forward to him being on the show. But if you're thinking about the Italian, I got a guy, right? The mafia approach, right? You have to be willing to share your industry. You have to be willing to share your network, and that will pay off in dividends long term. Because again, it's like, sales is a long process. Building your personal brand is a lifetime commitment, and building a business is a lifetime commitment. It's something you got to go into with the long term in mind.
Yeah, and having the right motivation. I don't know, selflessness. It's really just being a good person, being a good human, and and sharing what you know and providing value. And it's more of the golden rule kind of a situation, right? Where if you do the right things for the right people in the right amount, you're going to you're going to win in the long run.
Yes.
And it really comes down to those basic philosophies. So, what you're able to talk to people who are at any level in terms of developing their brand. Somebody's been around for 5 minutes to 5 years. You can still provide them some guidance and coaching and development. What's the best way? We're going to have some notes in the show notes, but what's the best way for somebody to identify? Yep, I am somebody that Isaac can help, and I need to get a hold of him. Like what should they be thinking about?
Would be very broad based to say like I can work with anybody and everybody. And you mentioned a good point of whether you're just starting out versus you're already an experienced professional. And the approach that I would take with both clients differs based off of where they're at. So if you're just starting out, we're not positioning you as the top authority in anything, right? We're positioning you as somebody who is an up and coming professional, somebody who is learning and aspiring to achieve that goal. And so you're taking people along for your journey and your process to achieve that, compared to the professional where you already have the expertise. So now you can talk about all of the knowledge and talk about your stories and talk about your life and, you know, the different things that you're able to offer. So the positioning and the approach is a little bit different. Typically, the best people that I work with are people who have a lot of success offline, but don't know the first thing about how they can leverage that credibility that they have, that those local successes, and transmute that into the digital manner. I've been able to work with podcasters, authors, creatives, models, entertainers, musicians, and really the end goal is varying by the client, but there are three main overarching reasons why somebody would want to build out their personal brand. Number one is to make money, right? You want to drive revenue for your business, or maybe you want to sell merchandise or make money through some sort of group coaching, or have a paywall behind content, whatever that might be. Maybe you want to build out your personal brand for a purpose, right? You're mission driven. You see this a lot with these billionaires who want to, associate themselves with some philanthropic cause. This is also seen, for example, people who have a deep connection to things and traumatic events that they've experienced, right? You think about domestic abuse survivors or sexual assault, right? These are people who turn into the best public speakers, the best authorities, because they are taking a mission and they're telling more people about it. And the final reason, Walter, why you'd want to build out your personal brand is very simply vanity. And I don't see that being, anybody in your audience, but we see this a lot in celebrities and entertainers. Hey, why do you want to be famous? Oh, it feels good, right? It's a win-win situation. I like it, right?
I'm filling a void.
Exactly. And I'm not here to talk about, which is better, which is worse. Should you even be driven by vanity? I'm not here to be your pastor or your father that you go and confess to. But what I would tell you is, if you're considering building out your personal brand, start by asking yourself why you want to build out your personal brand. And then we could talk about what are the steps that we can take and strategize and for you to implement in order to achieve that particular goal and actually, make more money or get more people to know about a certain cause. So identify those things. And then once you have an idea about where you want to go, then I come in and my firm comes in, and now we can start, okay, step one, step two, step three. And I'm really big in, every single consultant that we're going to bring on over the next decade is going to have a very big organic approach. I'm not some of this like, let's get rich quick. Building your personal brand takes time. I mean, it took me 5-6 years to land my first Forbes feature, right? And just today, I looked online and it turns out I was in another article. I'm like, that's so cool. But it took me 5 years of not getting that massive result that I was working towards to finally be able to have that compound success. And it's the same thing as sales. You can go through a dry spell, 6 months goes by and your revenue's not there. And then all of a sudden the floodgate opens and you have 25 clients who want to work with you and close.
So it's being understanding why you want to do this and where you want to go is a good place to start. Best place to reach you, website, LinkedIn, what's your preference?
Well, you can go to Google and type in Isaac Mashman and connect with me on the social media platform of your choice. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. Anywhere that you're there, I'm probably there as well. It can't be a personal branding guy and not be well connected.
Got it. So last question, Isaac. Past or present, any relationship with cigars?
Definitely. It's one of those things that I enjoy. Growing up, I was in Boy Scouts, which I attribute a lot to the man that I am today. And I believe that Boy Scouts should, not to get too political, should be the place for boys to become men. It should 100% be reserved for boys. And I remember I had a bunch of Scoutmasters who were military guys. One was a Marine, one was Navy, another was Navy. And these older men, and I'm still connected with some of them today, and sitting around the campfire. And it would always be towards the end. We had one, Mr. Ike, and he used to always chew on the cigar. He'd get the cheap Swisher Sweets. And being from Jacksonville, the Swisher Sweets factory is in Jacksonville, Florida. But then the older I got and the later I stayed up around the campfire, I'd realize that they would break out the cigars and they'd sit around and talk for hours. They'd watch the fire die down. I know one of my Scoutmasters, Mr. Larry, he would sit there just by himself, just smoking a cigar. And you would never see him smoke a cigar until it was late at night. And as an adult and as a younger man, I felt like it was a rite of passage. And I still believe it is a rite of passage in many ways, in many regards. But we see these masculine figures like Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger smoking the cigars in the movies, or Hannibal from the A-Team, right? And it was like at the end of every episode, Hannibal, and I know the TV show was way before my time, but at the end he'd like be like, I love it when a plan, comes together. And the end of the episode, every single time, would be him smoking a cigar on the plane or on the helicopter or whatever. And as an adult, I've kind of adopted that. And it's like, yeah, you don't need to smoke a cigar. You never do. It's not like a cigarette. You don't need to go out and smoke a cigarette in the rain, right, when it's freezing cold, like my grandmother used to do. But it's a want, right? It's a want. It's a desire. It's not a need. The relationship is different, and that's what most people misunderstand. And they're like, "Oh, you smoke cigars." You need to understand why, just like why you want to build out your personal brand. I never thought I'd draw this parallel, but why you want to build out your personal brand and why you want to smoke a cigar. The intention is different, and that's why. I'm a huge lover of Perdomos, Padrones, and Olivas. Those are probably my top three brands. Nick Perdomo, when I was first getting into the space, I went to YouTube, and he was this dude who was like, he looked Italian, even though he's not Italian. And he was this shorter guy and dressed in a really clean pinstripe suit. And he did a tutorial on how to light up a cigar. And I was like, man, I like this guy. This guy has class. And I love them. I didn't realize I was so passionate about them, but I can talk about them apparently for extended amounts of time.
Apparently, yeah. But there's different reasons to have a cigar. And to kind of tag on to what you're saying, I can go into any town that has a cigar lounge. I go into that cigar lounge, and it happened. We were talking about Arkansas. I went into Hot Springs. And there's a little cigar shop there on that little main strip. As soon as you walk in, like, you got something in common with all the people in there, men and women, right? All demographics, all economics. Everything is different, and you got one thing in common that you can start with, and to me, it's a great equalizer. Everybody can. What are you smoking? Right? How most of those conversations start. And boom, you're off to the races. And you might find something else. You might find you got nothing else in common, but isn't it cool? We both like cigars. So.
And there's not judgment. I mean, obviously, yeah, if you're smoking like a Swisher Sweet, might crack a joke or two, but it's not with the intent to hurt, right? And right. That's how you build those relationships. And that's something I also appreciate. It's not a judgmental space. We share a similar thing, a similar passion, a similar hobby. And I believe from a business standpoint, finding those ways to disconnect or disconnect on a emotional level just to connect and make more business. It's like going to a bar after a business conference, right? And having those conversations. You're sitting around, and now you introduce a cigar. It just takes that relationship deeper.
Yeah, and it's another vehicle to build off of and find some common ground.
Yes.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, Isaac, I appreciate all of the insights. I appreciate the passion for cigars, and thank you very much.
Walter, the pleasure is all mine, my friend.